You're saying growing on tensions between Russia and the West over
That's
Ukraine.
Right. It's Friday. Let's start with a cartoon. This is in the international New York Times. You can see President Obama relaxing on a beach there, cozying up to Asia because that's, after all, Obama really wants to refocus U.S. foreign policy on Asia. But look who's come here. It's a very muscular Vladimir Putin flexing his muscles, showing off his Crimea tattoo, and kicking sand into Obama's face. Now, if you look at the media coverage of this crisis, it's very different between the West and Russia. Interestingly, The Guardian, so British paper, has published a fiery article by a Russian journalist, Dmitry Kiselev. He is the boss of Russia Today and has often been called Putin's chief propagandist. Now, he's being targeted by EU sanctions, and he says this shows that the West, rather than the East, is putting freedom of speech under threat. He says Russian journalists are free to tackle difficult issues in their reporting without the fear of government sanctions. And so this leads him to say that East and West appear to be trading places.
But there's also a lot of focus on this new government that has taken over in Kiev.
That's right. The Wall Street Journal focuses on one of the many challenges that this government is facing, and that's to disarm the self-defense groups that popped up during the Maidan protests. Now, most of them have disbanded and gone home, but some linger on. And according to the Wall Street Journal, this ragtag militia, these militias are a cause of concern for Kiev because they're a very volatile group. The photo you can see there is of a young man, Anton Larinov. He's 25 years old. He's part of one of these militias, and he says that he's ready to spring back into action if the conditions of the country don't improve.
And this is a topic that also the Independent in the UK is running this
That's
morning.
right. It's focusing on the government in Kiev, and it says that as the standoff with Russia intensifies, this is where Europe should really focus all of its efforts. And it's a very interesting point of view because most of the editorials I've been reading say that the EU and the US really need to stand up to Russia, flex their muscles, not fall for Vladimir Putin's tricks again. But this article says that Europe should really focus on strengthening the credibility of the government in Kiev. But there's another article in The Independent by Mary Dejevsky, and she says that the role that the EU plays in Kiev really raises a question, and that's, does this amount to a form of colonialism? She says that for better or worse, the EU is changing, seems to be turning into some sort of a new colonial power, and Ukraine seems to be on the way to becoming an EU protectorate. And she says a debate really needs to be held about the role the EU would play.
Okay, well, moving on now. Florence, India, the world's biggest democracy, is still gaining a lot of attention.
That's right. Those elections, the biggest elections in history, kicked off this week. Huge turnout so far. It's on the front page of The Hindu, talking about how there's been a high turnout in the third phase. There are a total of 9 phases over a 6-week period. Now, a lot of focus also on the leading candidates. The controversial Hindu nationalist politician Narendra Modi, of course, getting a lot of attention. The Guardian points out that, he's currently in the lead to perhaps become the next prime minister, but more than a dozen of India's academics and artists have written a letter to The Guardian expressing their acute worry of his winning. Now, among them is the novelist Salman Rushdie and the sculptor Anish Kapoor. They say he embodies a callous, dangerous ideology that opposes the values that founded India. Now, Modi has been touting his bachelorhood for years. This is a weird little tidbit that I didn't even know. But during the election, he said that because he's a bachelor, this is a sign that he'll be corrupt-free because he doesn't have a family to support. But check out this article in the International New York Times. It turns out he was married. It was a very short-lived marriage 45 years ago that he abandoned just a couple weeks after the wedding. But this is the election surprise, and the International New York Times wonders if it'll affect the vote.
Right. And finally, you're going to bring us to Rio, where the crime problem was actually caught on tape.
That's right. This is Brazil's Globo TV. They hit the streets to report about crime in Rio. You can read about it in Slate, but we also have some footage of what happened. The journalist is interviewing a woman about the problem of street thieves, and to prove the point, look, a thief grabs her necklace and runs off down the street. Now, you couldn't ask for a better case in point there. But this article in Slate talks about crime in Rio and how in the lead up to the World Cup, it's a big source of concern. Police are trying to crack down on it, but it does seem to be working. They have some crazy statistics. According to the police, cell phone robberies in Rio have gone up 121% since last year's, and robberies on buses have spiked 118%. So be careful of your belongings.
Gosh, Florence Vimeno scanning lots of complex topics there across the international press. Thanks very much. Well, it's time now for a very quick break, but still to come in the next half hour, our focus, where manufacturing in Mexico is really flying high, fueled in a large part by its soaring aviation industry. We'll be back after this short break. See you then.
Special event.
April 17th, Algerians go to the polls to elect a new president. Abdelaziz Bouteflika's supporters have convinced him to run for a fourth term. But the candidacy of the ailing 77-year-old is more than controversial. Can he still run the country? With Algeria's stagnant society and soaring unemployment, the youth are eager for political change. How will Algeria carve out her future? Don't miss our special Election Day Algeria on France 24 and France24.com.